We will go ahead and get started. Again, thank you all so much for being here for this week's C+V webinar. We're honored to share this space with you and just continue to try to build community and really think about sense of belonging in our work and inclusivity and making our community a place where everybody feels welcome. And really our initiative is all about that. And we really try to focus on a sense of belonging and exploring our values as a community to boldly state, who we are and what we stand for and what we stand against. And so we're excited to just continue to be able to do this webinar series. And I am really excited about this one this week because we have a great lineup of speakers that I am really honored to share this space with. And we will do some introductions here as we go along, but today's webinar will focus on communication strategies. And basically over the last few weeks especially, we've had so many messages and it's been such a transparent process. So we have to thank everybody involved with kind of going through the protocols and the processes and everything that will make our campus feel safe and feel like home for folks. But we also know that it's a really, really hard time and that people are feeling a lot of pressure, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, and just a lot of unknowns. And that can lead to some times where we don't feel like we're communicating at our best, or we don't know how to ask for what we're kind of looking for, or we may not know how to kind of communicate in a way that gets the answers. And so today we want to just talk and open up the space to this group of panelists about how we healthily ask for information and kind of enter into space with our community members with understanding, empathy, and grace for others, which is always tough. Something that as we're trying to get work done amid both a humanitarian crisis of the heightened awareness of institutional racism and a health crisis with COVID and so much more going on. Nikki Latino said that best a few weeks ago. And so we're really just thinking about finding patience within the process and successfully navigating the unknown as a community. So without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce our speakers, and then we'll actually make time for them to do a further introduction. But first want to welcome Valerie Bartelt. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Business Information and Analytics at the Daniels College of Business here at DU. And Valerie's research interests primarily involve information communication technologies. And the thing that I'm really excited about is one of her focus areas is around technology use and adoption, which is a huge part of our communication strategies and virtual teams. And I couldn't think of a better opportunity to share that expertise because there's a lot going on with it. And the second person I want to introduce is Michael Boddy. And so he is a freelance journalist and upcoming second-year DU graduate student in the Media, Film, and Journalism Studies department. And before coming to DU, he studied multimedia journalism at the University of South Carolina and worked as a local newspaper reporter. So thank you for being here, Michael. We really appreciate it. And third, we have Renee Botta, and we have awesome representation from the Department of Media, Film, and Journalism Studies. She is an associate professor there and also the director of the International and Intercultural Communications Master's Degree Program. And Renee spent 17 years working in Southern and Eastern Africa and Haiti to improve health outcomes through health promotion and participatory communication. And a piece that I think is just so fascinating, and we can kind of talk more as we go into this webinar, is her focus areas on water, sanitation, and hygiene projects, and her research focuses on health behavior change, health promotion campaigns, international and intercultural health communication, and family and peer communication about health and health messages. And I, once again, couldn't think of a better expertise area to really share your knowledge and kind of what we can do as a community to be in this space together and learn more. And so without further ado, I will open it up and just kind of ask the panelists how you're doing, and if you're comfortable just checking in of how you're coping through everything, and we can get to know you a little bit more about your work. And I'll kick it over to Valerie to start us off.
Hi, yes, I'm Valerie Bartelt, and I'm an assistant professor in the Daniels School of Business. I primarily am doing research, teaching, and I have worked with grants. Cool things I'm going to highlight just kind of related to this talk. The grant I worked on was providing data, online data, so that people could access in multiple hospitals and different locations in case there was an emergency situation. So that was really relevant for them because in South Texas, that's where I was doing that because of hurricane season and things of that sort. For the different research I do, something that might be of interest because of just the Denver area. I've done research with technology use and adoption with the Denver smart cities. And so we kind of looked at how social capital interacted with their impressive living labs that has been well renowned and known all over. So that was an exciting research to be a part of. Also, I'm currently working on how IT professionals, because I'm in business, is coping using Zoom during this COVID situations. And we hope to apply it to more pandemic scenarios, looking at how different types of coping work, and we're creating a resilience framework, and then hopefully leading it to productivity in the workplace, because I'm working in business and it's always a business focus. So I teach master's level database and data warehouse, and I'm just going to teach an undergrad class this fall. So I think that's my highlights. Oh, and I'm coping. I'm a little more stressed than usual. I think most people are on that level over small things. What I am doing to try to help cope is doing a little bit more hiking and getting out and being a little more energetic. So.
Thank you so much, Valerie. We appreciate it. And right there with you with coping, it's nice to be in a place we can hike and kind of have that wellness outdoors. And Renee, we'd love to hear from you and how you're doing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so just a little bit more about how my work relates to this. I actually work a lot in, as Chase mentioned in the introduction, I work a lot in Southern and Eastern Africa and also in Haiti. And right now I have a big project in Haiti, and we've been working directly on COVID. We do work with WASH in general in that project. And so what happened is that my team of nurses that I work with down there were asked to be on the national COVID team working on COVID across Haiti. And so they have been training health practitioners on COVID prevention in hospitals and clinics settings. We've also been doing some stuff in the communities as well. That's predominantly started this month, but up until now, we've trained about 650 healthcare professionals. And I will say that I'm used to being there, being in place, and so that really speaks to communication. The struggles of this is that, and then also brings in the technology piece that Valerie knows more about, but you know, I'm used to actually being there and being present and while we work on these things. And so it's been a struggle for me to have to sit here in my living room in Colorado, you know, while my folks in Haiti are doing these things. But we've, you know, been able to work it out, and we, you know, we talk on WhatsApp every day and try to Zoom, but the internet connection doesn't really work very well. So it's, you know, struggle figuring that out. But at any rate, working on a number of levels, how do you communicate about COVID on so many levels, particularly I think around this notion of distance. And I think that's something I really want us to think about today is distance. You know, we talk about social distancing, but we really mean physical distancing. And we're all suffering from this physical distancing that's happening. And it is creating more social distance, right? Social distance is what we don't want. We need that social support. We need that social connection. And so this greater physical distance creates a disconnect also for social distance. And I think that that's a really important thing for us to think about, strategies for being less socially distant in these times. Yeah, and just engaging in authentic dialogue and so many things. But I'll toss it to T. Michael so he can bring in stuff now too.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So as Chase said before, I'm a graduate student here at DU, second year graduate student actually. So I'm still feeling relatively new to the community. But I mean, aside from what I do is, as a student, I have to interact with other students and as well with my professors. So communication is just very important, just like inherently there in that part of my job. And I'm also a teaching assistant for professors in the department. So that makes communication important as well. And I'm an assistant equipment coordinator, which means if you're a student journalist who needs something for a project, you would go through me. And I'm planning to continue that work this year. So things aren't going to be entirely the same, but it's just a lot of us here, all of our jobs are shifting and changing in a bunch of ways. So it's just like really important for us to just kind of be patient with each other. Coping, every day I'm thankful for the fact that I am not sick with COVID, like that alone helps me to just like deal with the fact that COVID exists. But it's, being there for each other, as Renee said, whether it's, virtually or socially distant, it's possible. And so it's a way for all of us to help each other cope as this just continues to be our life, so yeah.
Thank you all so much. No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable and transparent about how you're coping and how you're doing, because it's easy to kind of get into that mindset of just doing, but we were really trying to slow this one down this week and think about, how's everybody feeling and how's everybody doing and coping through these times. And, that kind of newness, so to speak, has worn off, where we were all in crisis mode and planning mode in the spring, and now we're thinking about what does it look like long term, and how do we communicate in this world. And so I just wanted to kind of open up the space, and feel free to jump in. I can kind of start things off by calling on someone, but how do we communicate in this time that not only kind of gets the message across, but it feels authentic and transparent and also healthy? And I think it looks different in this virtual world than it looks face to face. And so given you all's work, how would you describe this kind of communication? What does it look like? Are there any tips that you could point out to viewers? And I kind of want to open up the space to whoever wants to go first. So.
I don't know if we should continue going in the same order or not.
We always laugh because when we webinars, we start out with it and it's like people just enter into this rotation and cycle. So Valerie, you can kick it off, but
Okay.
yeah, we can open it up to whoever wants to. That's perfect.
Okay, yeah, that's no problem. I think especially in this pandemic situation, it's important to be aware that everyone and understand that everyone's a little more heightened in stress. And so with that, the communication I feel should be as honest and transparent as possible based on the current circumstances that we know, but also I think it should be highly expressed that circumstances and situations may change, because a preparedness for people to understand, things are changing all the time. I think that's very important to stress.
Thanks, Valerie. And I'm curious, Renee, what your thoughts are on what that looks like. You had mentioned kind of transparency throughout the process.
Yeah, I think it's, it's super important. Again, I focus on dialogue. I talk about dialogue all the time, and I think that word gets tossed around, but in my field anyway, it has a really specific meaning that is so much more than what we think of. And I think that that's super important. And so when I say that, what I'm talking about is the fact that I think that a lot of communication really focuses on disseminating information and extracting information. And we do a lot of dissemination and extraction. And, that's in all forms of communication. We can pay attention in our conversations that we do that as well, right? And I think that dialogue is not about just dissemination and extraction. It's about, communicating and listening with the intent to understand, and trying to get other people's perspective, and recognize that not everybody's perspective is the same, and we're all dealing with a whole bunch of stuff, yet there's so much that we don't necessarily understand based on what other people are dealing with and all the layers of things that other people are dealing with. You guys mentioned the fact that we get to go hiking. We live in this beautiful place, although wildfires are crazy right now. But, I feel like that is such a privilege for us that we get to do that. And so I think that that's part of it is just being really open, when we communicate, open to what other people might be experiencing and really hearing that, even if it's completely different from what we're experiencing. I talk about the Johari's window of knowledge a lot because I think that really helps me in my work, and it's now helping me in my day-to-day. And that's this idea that, I have my own knowledge based on my own experiences and research and whatever it's based on, right? But the person I'm communicating with, they have their own knowledge. But there's also these two other quadrants that we have to remember, and that's the knowledge that we create together and thinking about that in our communication. And then also the knowledge that neither of us has and that we can seek together. And I think that that's also just really important. And I guess maybe that's a lot of headspace to think about when you're like in the moment, but I think that overall it can help us to have more health, this idea of having healthier communication and dialogue.
Thank you so much. And I was thinking about that, and I always snap into my background in mental health counseling, and it's so easy to just snap into these moments like that. But I was wondering, Renee, if you could talk a little bit more. You have such a focus on the socio-cultural context and what's going on for folks, and you kind of mentioned that. And how do we slow ourselves down in the moment and think about how we're communicating with folks, and what does strategies and techniques look like from your understanding? I love the knowledge quadrant there.
Yeah. Again, I really think that that's a super important thing for me to remember, is that, for all of us to remember, is that, how little we actually do know, even if we are experts in our field, right? And just reminding ourselves of that a lot, because context, in my world, context is everything. Like I can know a ton about, water and sanitation, but I don't know anything about your lived experience of water and sanitation in your community, right? And so context is really, really important. And I think that that's that sociocultural piece, is what is the context within which other people are experiencing these things. And we can think about that with COVID right now. And that's what I mean, right? This idea that I'm experiencing COVID from my little world, but that, doesn't mean that it's probably likely very different from other people's worlds in terms of what they're experiencing. Again, given their context, given, what's happening there. And I think that we do forget that, a lot. We walk through life and we are in our little bubble, and it's hard for us to remember that our bubble is just a bubble. It's not the reality of the rest of the world. Or even our neighbor's bubble is going to be very different. So we don't have to go very far for that to happen. And so I think that that's a really important part of that, is, again, remembering that our experiences are our experiences, and own them as our experiences, but don't expect those to be other people's experiences.
Thank you so much. And we had Margie on our Q&A ask, what was the name of the model that you mentioned?
The Johari window of knowledge with the 4 quadrants. Is that, yeah, it's Johari, Johari.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's such a great way of thinking about knowledge and everybody's lived experiences, which was such a big part of C+B's work. So I appreciate you sharing about that. And T. Michael, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, going off of what Dr. Botta was talking about, it's I think, especially from my experience this past quarter with like everything being online, it's like, it's important to be just honest and just to remember, like, when we're sitting behind a screen all the time, it's like kind of easy to forget that it's a human person on the other side of the screen. And so it's like, if, you may not, this person on the other side of the screen may not be sick, but they might have somebody in their life who's lost their job or something like that. And it's just hard for them to like say it. And as well, I don't know if there are any other adults with ADHD in this webinar, but to get 1 million emails a day is like brain breaking. And so it's okay to be like, to send an email yourself and be like, hey, I'm not that good at checking my emails right now, but if you go a day without hearing from me, try me again. Because it's just the way things are right now, my brain is breaking. It's okay to say that. So yeah, I think honesty is really important there. And if somebody is like, hey, email isn't good for me, maybe you can text me, maybe you can call me. It's just, we have to be more flexible, I think, right now. It's like everybody's life is at stake, so we got to be flexible. That's just how it is. So yeah, if something is just really feeling like I want to, but if I do, my brain will break, say it. Just say that.
I love that. I love that transparency and honesty. And I do think we were, thinking about, this is such a hard time, but there are some lessons learned. And I think one of those is that idea that we can share about, I have family obligations. I have a sick parent or kid at home. I have something going on. I get introduced my pet, which is always a fun one. Like those pieces of people that we kind of get outside of our boxes and our experiences. And actually, to you, Michael, you led us perfectly into the next question we would love to think about is, one of our C+V steering committee and integration committee members, she pointed out that, this is our first ever hybrid online and in-person semester. And it's just going to feel so different. And it's okay to just say that and be like, it's going to be different. And as much as we want to support the community, it will feel different. And people have different communication strategies, and it'll just look different. And so, T. Michael, I'd love to kick it back to you. Is how will this communication look different, do you think, for students, faculty, staff, alumni, our community in general? Just from your views and experiences, what will that look like?
Well, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I hope that we're just going to maybe, I don't think lenient is a good word, but just kind of be patient and not really expect every communication that comes to us to be this formal, professional, well put together thing. Does that make sense? Like sometimes you're going to be in a place where it's like, I just have to like send a text real quick and be like, hey, I can't do that right now. Or like, hey, can we reschedule this thing, this Zoom meeting or whatever we have going on? Everything can't be suit and tie anymore, if that makes sense. Because it's just, we're all sort of in our pajamas metaphorically right now.
And physically at times too.
Yeah. So if maybe somebody, like Dr. Botta was just saying, she communicates with her Haiti people through WhatsApp. Maybe some classes will do a WhatsApp for the class. I don't know, but I think we might be coming up with some ideas of how we're going to get creative with this and just sort of accept the state that everybody's in and not have this expectation of perfect, formal, dressed up communication.
Yeah, I love that. And that's what we have been thinking. And we use WhatsApp for our graduate fellows at C+V, and Anne and I are always texting about C+V, and email, and some folks love Microsoft Teams and all these different pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
And with that comes this kind of idea of technological tools and online teams. And I'd love to hear from you, Valerie. What does this look like? And I also have been thinking a lot about, what do boundaries look like on these teams too? Because now you can be reached at all times almost. And so there's kind of this double-edged argument to it, that you feel like you can really connect, but at times you feel like you can't disconnect either. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, thanks. I'm a proponent of technology, so you might hear a slanted view, but me and my colleagues and I, we all kind of think that there's going to be a different reality of interacting with technology, and even our sense of time after this, because like you said, we're all flexible with everything. Kids are at home. You might be living, with other people who you need to be a little bit more careful with and stay at home a little bit more. There's just a lot of different things going on in addition to the technology and your availability. So when I'm thinking about communication tools, I think about the media richness theory, and it goes back to having lean versus rich technology. And the lean would be the asynchronous, like not in real time type connection, where you're usually only have text only, and you know, like email, where you can respond at your leisure, versus this rich technology where it's more in sync in real time. And then hopefully the most richest would be that visual component as well. If you are able to, and to get it, because I know in other countries like Renee is dealing with, there's issues with that visual component. So that being said, there's people who traditionally work in California in very expensive areas, and now they've been approved to work remotely wherever. So a lot of people are leaving the San Francisco Bay Area and going to different parts of the state just because of expenses a lot primarily. And so this is really going to disrupt, hopefully in a good, positive way, how we're going to interact and relate. And I'm a big Zoom proponent as well, as far as that richness. And there's a couple of things to mention with Zoom. So it's very good for equality. If you think about it, we're all in the same square of Brady Bunch dimensions and interacting with that. And also some people were joking of having a universal Zoom t-shirt that everyone wears, because we're all, you know, here together in the same space, in the same quadrant. So, you know, equality, that's something to think about. There's breakout room features in Zoom that's continually getting better and improved, where you can even assign teams beforehand versus it being random. Because I do use a lot of teams in my class, and I like to keep some teams that are consistent throughout the quarter, because I think it's good for growth. And I put them in different majors and different skill sets, and diversity as well, so that they all can hopefully learn from each other during that quarter. And then in addition, a lot of my colleagues are using Zoom for recording the lectures, or using another tool actually for the recording of the lectures. But then during class, during Zoom, there's a more interactive type experience. So the lectures are available online, where they can record, or they can rewind and watch at their leisure, as far as the learning pace of each student. And then when coming to class, students are prepared to work with the instructor in learning those concepts and tools with interactive problems and things of that sort. So again, pros and cons, I like to look at the pros as far as technology being introduced.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've even was acknowledging that I get to know people more with their backgrounds, because I'm like, oh, there's some books there, or, you know, they like Star Wars or something like that. So that has been a fun part of it. And Renee, I wanted to open a space for you too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I really appreciate what T. Michael was saying in terms of being honest. And I think that this really, and this also I'll segue into answering, there's a quick Q&A question that I think this speaks to as well. And I think that, you know, I'm going to be teaching an in-class hybrid, an in-person hybrid class in fall, 2 of them actually, grad classes. And, you know, I think that I personally, and I think others are excited to be in person with people, because I feel like I haven't really been hardly at all, like a lot of us. And so I'm really excited to be able to have that part of the class when we get to be in person. But I also recognize that we're all going to be wearing masks and sitting 6 feet apart. And so it's also going to be, I have to like temper how, you know, how excited I am about it. Cause that also, I might find out that actually is weirder and less comfortable than, you know, than being, you know, I don't even know, on Zoom, I don't know. But again, so I think that, again, it's the expectations thing, right? Like I think that T. Michael was talking about is like, you know, temper our expectations and be kind to ourselves. And again, this speaks to, you know, the question I saw, again, I think that we have to give ourselves permission for these emotions that come up, right? And permission to, I feel like I have this tendency to want to manage everything and, you know, and be better at it and manage it. And, you know, I can deal with this and I don't have COVID, so I'm good. And, you know, and all of that. And it's like, you know, it's okay. You can just sit with whatever are those feelings you have, you know, give yourself permission to be scattered, give yourself permission for these things that come up. And I find that that can help, you know, be a better way of dealing with them. Again, you know, now that we're in this for a long haul, as you were saying, Chase, at first we were like, all like, okay, we're just dealing with this. We're going to get past it. It's going to be great. And now we're like, oh, wait a minute. We're in this for a while. So now how do we sit with it and be more comfortable with it? And I think it's, you know, about giving ourselves the permission that we're happy to give others, as you know, and so give that to ourselves too.
Yeah, that permission piece is huge, because sometimes it feels like we have to be a specific way during all of this and like either be positive or negative, but it's like this spectrum of feelings all the time. And we had a great Q&A question that we'll get to in just a few minutes, but it ties into that, and I appreciate it. If anybody does have any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box or the chat. But we have just time for a few more questions, so I wanted to think about it. And as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of the things that we've received have been so important from a protocol and how-to perspective. But I was wondering if you all would be willing to share, how are you feeling going into this semester? You know, we've heard about anxiety and fears, and that's such a great point that you brought up, Renee, because we were talking about community plus values. And is it harder to go in on a community plus values initiative when you're all on Zoom? And like Valerie, I love what you were talking about, how we're all together in this space. Or do you go in and you're all 6 feet apart and it feels really uncomfortable and you're like, we're all in masks? And is it harder to build community in person than it is virtually right now? And those are just real questions. And so I'll kick it back to you, Renee, because you kind of had alluded to this, but how are you feeling in the process? How do you feel like maybe your students and others in the community might be feeling? And we love to kind of think of, so what are some strategies? We always love strategies around kind of slowing ourselves down and thinking about those feelings and processing them during these times.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just go back to, again, giving yourself permission to feel whatever it is that you're feeling and recognizing whatever it is that you're feeling. And, you know, I don't have all the answers. I am curious. I'm being curious with this because, again, I am, you know, I'm looking forward to you know, the classes in the fall, but I am a little bit anxious about it, right? Like, what's that going to be like? Do I want to wear a mask for 2 hours in a classroom? Not really. But, you know, again, the trade-off is that we get to be there together. And again, the Zoom thing, I think for a lot of us, the Zoom fatigue is real, right? And so, you know, maybe Valerie can talk more about that too, because I certainly know that I feel it and struggle with the Zoom fatigue. And so, again, I just think as far as strategies go is recognize what you're feeling, be honest and open about what you're feeling. Again, just like what T. Michael was talking about. I think also, you know, look to others and say, you know, what are others doing that works? And I think this speaks to sort of what Valerie was talking about too, right? Like in the technology, but also in person, like, you know, what seems to be working that helps, and just, you know, again, communicate it. I always say that, you know, talking about stuff, you know, can help so much. Having dialogue about what you're experiencing, I think in this COVID time is just as important as having dialogue about what it is you're trying to learn about. And I think T. Michael talked about that too, that's, I think really, really important. So those are the strategies I'll be using, and talk to me again mid-quarter and we'll see where we're at.
Learning with grace without everybody together, right? And that's perfect, because I would love to hear from you, T. Michael. I really love what you were saying about how you're just like want folks to be open about when they're struggling, when they're feeling good. And I'd love to hear how you would maybe recommend from your perspectives how we find patience in the process, grace with one another, kind of assume best intentions at times on how we're communicating when we know there's going to be conflict. That's just a guarantee. It's a guarantee in regular life, let alone COVID life. And so how do we find that patience in the process and learn from this a little bit?
along the way, I guess, is how we'll figure it out. I mean, like Dr. Boda was saying, it's there's a little bit of anxiety there, admittedly, but I mean, I'm happy to be going back to school, continuing my education, obviously, and I'm as an introvert, I don't mind wearing a mask. I'm like, yes, this is great. Nobody knows who I am. I get, but but no, just kidding. But yeah, I mean, we're just gonna have to uh, bite the bullet and wear that mask for 2 hours if we're gonna be around people for 2 hours. That's just how it is. And I know we were just talking about being patient, but I mean, if there's also a sort of responsibility there to like, like if somebody's sitting 3 feet away from me with no mask, I'm gonna say something and be like, hey, move away or put on a mask or both, please. Um, and I think we all have a responsibility to just kind of be like that now, um, because if we're not, it'll get worse. That's just so. Um, so it's about being patient and it's about being responsible a little bit, I think. Um, but yeah, and there's probably going to be a lot of for the in-person classes, a lot of what did you say? Because, and so we're gonna have to be patient there because we're not going to be able to understand each other quite as well when we can't see each other's faces entirely. So yeah, but patient and responsible, and we'll figure it out along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you brought up such good points about being okay with the process, that we're not going to have all the answers right away, and giving ourselves and others grace. And I really love the piece you said about kind of talking to folks in our community. And this is kind of where our work with values comes in for C plus B is, what are our shared values? And if one of them is to care for each other in a community, what does that look like? And so that could be something like wearing a mask around other people, or giving them grace when they feel like you can tell something's going on. And I always just love to think about if you're feeling overwhelmed, one of the best things a doctoral student told me when I was in my master's degree and I was counseling folks was state a fact, reflect a feeling. And so like, this is what's going on and this is how I'm feeling, or I'm seeing this going on. Are you feeling this way if you're talking to someone else? And so I love that kind of slowing down of the process that you were talking about. And I think you all bring up a great point just through your ways of being of, we're going to have to find humor in this. And that's something that we have talked about that has felt a little bit tough to find at times, is to just find humor in that we are going to be wearing different masks. We might not be able to hear each other, and there's a lot going on. And so I just always think about that in this space. And I wanted to make room for you as well, Valerie, if there was anything you wanted to talk about with patients in the process, and kind of Zoom fatigue, and all the realness of this situation that comes with the technology and this process.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there's one thing business-wise that comes up to me is the old-fashioned water cooler kind of experience when you're face-to-face and you're all drinking from the same fountain and you have time to do the small talk. Well, that's not as easy to do, and especially online with Zoom, but it would be great if even during meetings or class time to kind of build in a little water cooler kind of experience so people can have those spontaneous communications during the whole meeting period. So I think that is important to try to cultivate those, and share feelings that people have and experiences with one another. And then another takeaway would just be to filter things through that empathetic lens. So always looking, and especially during this time, we always have some coping skills like take deep breath, but during this time, take 2 deep breaths. And the same with count to 10, maybe count to 20. So again, allow yourself some extra time as well, in addition to the other person, and with being more flexible and definitely more understanding, like I think we all have communicated.
Sorry about that. No, I love that point about just realizing that it's going to take a little bit more, and really that mindfulness component of like, what do I need right now at this point, that you and T. Michael and Renee have all pointed to. And that actually leads me to one of our questions that I was wondering if you could start us off with, Valerie, is around Kristen asked a great question about that we need to be both patient and communicative to change our behavior to stay healthy in all the communities where we interact. And so do you have any methods, thinking from your lens, about how places have been successful in changing behaviors of large populations? So a lot of what we've been talking about is kind of the individual, but what does it look like on a large population, from your sense?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think a lot of these community settings where we can gather a lot of different people from different areas and kind of get a pulse of how the community is feeling, I think that's a good thing. Then we can relay and do responses based on what we're observing in society. I know for technology, there's ways for illnesses you can monitor in neighborhoods, for instance, that there's a particular outbreak, and then maybe, you know, suggest a little bit more caution in that area, or things of that sort. So I think the same thing could apply to emotions, emotional states as well, is kind of feeling a pulse of maybe even different types of groups, and kind of trying to regulate based on that.
I love that. Yeah, and thinking about not only individual experience, but like what is it going to look like for a student who is in a specific degree program that maybe is more focused on in person, whereas others can pivot virtually, or maybe someone on the staff has to be in person in the office, whereas others can't. And so it's gonna look different for different populations, and kind of having that larger empathy, and grace for groups, and understanding that there's going to be also different group experiences as well. I love that piece. And Renee, I'm curious from your lens what you think about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of what I focus on is behavior change, in terms of a lot of the public health stuff that we work on, around the world. And, we talk about meeting people where they're at. And again, this is, we do, even though we're talking about, large groups and changing large groups, doing big, large population change, we realize we do have to start with the individual, and that's super important, and recognize the individuals within those populations and where are they at in terms of the things we're asking them to do. So in asking people to wear a mask, to be socially distant, to practice all of these kinds of things that we want people to practice to keep us all safer, recognizing that lots of people have different kinds of barriers that prevent them from doing that. And some of those are peer pressure barriers. It's a lot easier. A colleague in psychology was talking about, I think it was really great. She was talking about the fact that, we might feel like, oh, well, of course I'm going to wear the mask. Of course I'm going to stay socially distant. But then all of a sudden, people I like invite me over to their house, to their deck, and now nobody's wearing a mask and everybody's sitting close. And now it feels weird. Wait a minute. Had every intention to do those things, but now I'm the odd person out because I'm going to put the mask on. Now I feel very severe, and I have to have a lot of self-confidence to now engage in that. And so, recognizing that those situations happen, and sort of, she talks about having a plan for that, right? Ahead of time, like what will you do if that happens? And so, and that's similar to some of the work that I do, where we have people talk through that, like, okay, well, what can you do? What do you think would help you to get over these barriers that you have to be able to do these things? And then also, what can we do to help? So it's a lot of little stepping stones, I guess, is the bigger answers that I would give, is that, recognizing it takes a lot of little steps to get to big change.
I love the stepping stones metaphor. We've been thinking about that a lot as, organizational change and values. And values gives you a starting point to have a conversation. Levita said that in a webinar in the past, and it's resonated with me really deeply. But then once you have that kind of starting point, having those conversations, having those strategies for yourself, and so finding what works for you and having a plan is always nice. Because one of my colleagues, when I was working at Bank Street College of Education, she said, call someone into a conversation rather than call them out. And so what does it look like to have that calling into a conversation? And I wanted to kind of throw that question to you, T. Michael. You've had great views on kind of what it looks like to be in that real space with folks. And so what does it look like to have that conversation, and kind of think about navigating? I love this question that someone gave. Some days I feel energetic and I get so much accomplished, and then some days I'm like, what is the point? Like, how do we keep going? And so how do you manage the emotions for yourself, but also think about kind of the larger community, and they're going through a lot too, and they might have these views and experiences. So just wanted to kick that over to you, T. Michael.
Sorry, I was on mute. But yeah, like, I mean, it's these emotions. It's like we think emotion is just like not as valid of anything as like logic or ethics usually. And so we feel like we can't even like say that I'm feeling this way, because if I say that, then it just sounds like an excuse. And so it's like, why would I even say that? But it's like, but right now, if you say this, chances are the person you're saying it to is going to be like, yeah, me too. so I think because times have changed, it's time to let emotion have an equal standing in our lives as the logistics and the ethics. But that's just my opinion. So, but yeah, I think that's going to be a big part of it going forward. I mean, that's how you have the conversation. There's no other, the only way to have the conversation is to have the conversation. You have to say what is going on up here. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And one thing I've been thinking about a lot is that, no one really could have predicted, it's happened before, but like different things going on, like, the politicization of mask wearing and all these different pieces. And so, how do we have that conversation? And this is open to anybody. How do we have those tough conversations with folks, and realize that we find the humanity in everybody? And that's like something that the Undoing Racism workshop talks a lot about, is finding the humanity and kind of this restorative piece. And there's a lot of emotionally charged moments right now of anger, fear, anxiety, and a lot less of the kind of balance that maybe we sometimes get. And so how does that feel? What does it look like? Like, what's the real raw answer,
Yeah. Sometimes, I also have friends who have not necessarily been living life the way I've been living life over the past 6 months. And so it's like, you don't have to be like, we're not friends anymore. you just have to be like, right now, the way things are in my life, this is something I don't feel comfortable with, or I would feel more comfortable if X, or I would feel more comfortable if you X, and the way that these people in your life respond to that is ultimately up to them, obviously. But I mean, yeah, if hopefully people won't take this as something that's going to kill our relationships if and when this is all over. They have to look at it as something that's the here and now. It's indefinite, so I can't say that these conversations are easy, because like they're just not. But you have to do what's best for you, not for your buddy who wants to go have a beer at the I don't know. So yeah,
it's so true. And I love that it's like, where do you find that balance for yourself, and what does that look like? And Renee or Valerie, I'd love to open that question to you, because honestly, that's been the toughest part for me, just being transparent, is, it kind of ties into all sorts of views and identities and experiences. But Renee, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, I think this goes back to that notion of don't think of it as dissemination and extraction. Think of it as dialogue, right? I'm not here to tell you what I think you should be doing, even though that might be where you're coming from and where your inclination is, right? Like, oh my God, why are you? But the idea is that think of it as a dialogue. So ask a question instead of make a statement. I think if we can form things in terms of question, rather than statements. It will go a long way to actually being able to have dialogue about something. You know, we make all kinds of assumptions about why people might not be in a mask that we don't know why they might not be in a mask. And so I think that's really important. So again, I guess just going back to trying to think of it as dialogue and trying to have that. And I know that's hard. It is hard.
Yeah, it's hard. We're emotional beings, and that's what one of the things that when we're kind of researching values, it was this idea of rather than, I love what you said, ask a question rather than state a statement at them or give them an instruction. And so you know, I've had family members and friends and trying to ask them, why is it important to you to not wear a mask? Like, you know, is it something that we can meet on, or is it something that maybe we're just never going to see eye to eye, and for now we just won't be able to spend time together, and kind of thinking about if that situation is maybe too toxic or just not safe for you at that moment. And so I love that, of asking a question, and kind of, if you get down to the point of we might have similar values, then we can start a conversation on, okay, so maybe would you be willing to wear it if it helped your family member, or if it helped your child at school, or something like that, to kind of build in that empathy is a helpful strategy. And Valerie, I wanted to open the space to you as well on this question around all these tough times and just the challenges of all of these things.
Yeah, I think something that you all haven't touched on yet, I like what you all said, is make sure you have that support network somewhere. And so it so happens I'm working on multiple research projects, and usually at the beginning of our Zoom meeting, we, for some reason, all debrief and kind of let it all out there as far as what we're dealing with and new things that have cropped up. And then, you know, troubleshooting throughout the group kind of takes place, not technology, but just troubleshooting as far as how things can be more successful for you all. And that's actually come really naturally with all of my colleagues. And ironically, one person I'm doing research with, I just started, she was my mentor during the PhD program. And so she's, again, like suggesting online food options for when things get busy in the fall, and, you know, coupons for that and things of that sort. So already thinking of a strategy for when things are going to get busy as far as how to handle situations versus getting in the midst of the situation and trying to figure things out. So yeah, I just really encourage that support group.
That's such a great point. And it gets to that idea of, like Renee, you were talking about meetings can become so much like you give information, you extract information. And it's such a good point of, I think, a huge strategy that you alluded to, Valerie, is having the support system, and also just taking time in meetings, like you said, to talk to each other at the beginning, that kind of water cooler talk, so to speak, and just check in, you know, how's family, how's everything going, I think is a huge thing. And then at the end, there might be some emotionally charged moments, like someone might not have worn a mask, someone might not be following protocols, you know, someone might be upset that someone isn't. And so having a space to talk about emotion, I think, is really important in these conversations. And you all have alluded such wonderful thoughts around this in this conversation. And it's just so hard in these times where it's like, we got to get it done, we got to do these. So reminding ourselves to slow ourselves down and breathe, like Valerie said, and take a moment. And so we're getting close to the end here, but I did want to open it up for final thoughts. I'll kick it over to Renee just on kind of final thoughts as we move into this semester. It's drawing close really rapidly, and any kind of final pieces there.
Yeah, you know, it is coming really close. And also what's interesting too is that for those of you who are paying attention, it's you know, we're starting a little late for those of us on the quarter system. I know our law school started, but the rest of us, we don't start till September 14th. And so we're sort of sitting back and watching all the other schools that have been going back this week. And we've been seeing a lot of things happening, you know, with University of North Carolina, you know, hundreds of students tested positive for COVID. And so they have decided to go all online for the semester. Notre Dame, University of Notre Dame, they also had hundreds of students test positive, and they decided 2 weeks to go online and then sort of see where they're at. You know, there's a colleague has a student at University of Texas at Austin, and they're, you know, they're making sure that students are very tightly. They're, you know, once you've tested negative for COVID, you are, you know, basically in a very tight rope as far as what they're allowing you to do to try to maintain that negative status. And so, and again, you know, just in other words, lots of different things happening all over in terms of other universities. And I think that for a lot of my colleagues I know, and for a lot of students, it's raising a lot more anxiety. You know, what's happening? Are we going to, you know, stay in person? Are we going to wind up going online too? What's happening? And so I guess I just want us to also focus. I think all of these things we've been talking to apply to that as well, and that we really need to be thinking about that. That too in terms of this, and being gentle with ourselves and with others as we think about going on. And I love that Valerie brought up support. That's so important. You know, we know that, you know, again, I'm interested in health outcomes because of my work. And we know that support helps reduce stress, but it also helps reduce the negative impacts of stress, because stress has a huge negative impact on our bodies in a lot of ways. And so support really helps in that as well. And so I think finding support, seeking support, asking for support is really, really important. So that would be the last thing I would leave us with, I think.
Thank you so much, Renee. Valerie and T. Michael, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience as we wrap up?
Well, the only thing I would say is that hopefully this fall, no matter what happens, that students and professors and the community were all maybe a little bit more prepared. I feel like last March, we kind of got a little inoculation, a little dose of what could happen, you know, if things get worse, hopefully not. So hopefully, you know, we have a little bit of immunity, so to speak, with situations, so that hopefully we can all hang in there and survive and support one another and be together.
Thanks, Valerie. T. Michael?
Agreed. No. Yeah, just, I mean, yeah, final thoughts. Just as we head into the quarter, you know, it's the anxiety you're feeling, you're not alone. And always carry that hand sanitizer, you know, it's gonna really gonna come in handy. Wear your mask, be nice about it. If one of your friends isn't, ask questions instead of instead of make statements, you know, as we said earlier. But yeah, just and thank you all for listening to what this 22-year-old had to say about this. So I really appreciate it.
Hey, we appreciate your voice and your experiences, and honored to share the space with you, T. Michael, and Valerie, Renee as well. You know, we know everybody has so much going on, and every week that we ask folks to join us for our C+B webinars, they take that hour and a half out of their day to do sound check and do these things. So we just appreciate you all being here so much and sharing that with our community. And as we go along, we'll continue to be doing our C+B webinars every other week. Even into the fall quarter and beyond. And we are in the process of planning events as well around a multitude of different topics, and working on different political programming, how we kind of have a resilience and find community support during this time. How do we intentionally build community during this time? And I'm very excited and have to give a shout out to Dill, our graduate fellow. She is finalizing our Community Voices initiative. And so that actually ties into a lot with what was said today around sharing experiences and about being seen, heard, and validated, as Linnea, one of our interviewees, says on her story. And so we just want to thank you all so much for being here. There are resources available on the website here, and I dropped it into the chat box. And if you do want any more information, or you have some ideas or anything, please email us at communityplusvalues@du.edu, and like us on Facebook and Instagram. We share updates, and we are just so appreciative for you all being here again. And thank you. Stay safe, take care, and we will see you all in the community, whether virtually or in person, as we keep going. So thank you again.